Hello. So, picture this. You're 70 plus and you've been a safe driver for decades, but suddenly your independence is under threat. Could new regulations, escalating insurance and even social pressures make driving an impossible dream? Is this the future we're heading towards, where age, not ability, dictates who can be behind the wheel? Imagine a future where your driving freedom actually has an expiry date. Are we ushering in a reality where senior citizens are being systematically pushed off our roads? Because, according to many of you, yes, that's exactly what's happening. Welcome to Grey Matters. Hello, and welcome to Grey Matters, the channel that promotes the fact that the older generation still matters and has relevance, and which looks at issues that matter to the older generation. And judging by last week's video, this is something that really matters to you. If you remember, we talked about the proposed changes to UK driving licence renewals for those aged 70 plus, and it generated more than 1,400 comments, and many of them reckon that the government is trying to get us off the roads. It feels as if the open road, that symbol of freedom for generations, is gradually becoming a no-go zone for the elderly. There's a growing debate around older drivers and road safety. You really got to ask the question, is the government trying to protect everyone, or is it just discriminating against us? Many of our viewers claim that the proposed regulations, which include medical assessments, eye tests and so on, are indeed a clear case of age discrimination, although others say they would support eye tests, and I've lost count of the number of HGV and taxi drivers who have been telling us that they have to undergo regular medical screening and eye tests anyway. They're used to it, and many are still driving big vehicles actually in retirement. So let's dive into the real data and see if there might indeed be some age discrimination going on. And this, I think you will find quite interesting. According to the .gov website, overall in 2023, which is the latest data we can get, around 25% of all drivers killed or seriously injured were older drivers in their 70 plus range. Data, unfortunately, doesn't tell us who was at fault in those fatal collisions. So, bear in mind, just because an older driver was involved doesn't mean the collision was their fault, although the media and general topics and conversations around would have you believe that they're always at fault. Now, young drivers between 17 and 25 accounted for 20%. So how does that square with the statistic in the same report that we quoted in our last video, that young drivers are 4 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured than those who are older? And yet their percentage is 5% lower than the oldies. Now, can someone explain this? Because I'm no statistician and my poor old brain can't work that out. I'm sure it's all to do with numbers of actual people rather than percentages. But I would make a very educated guess that in many cases, the older driver deaths were due to frailty and their physical inability to survive the trauma of a serious collision. But some interesting facts come to light when you look at the contributory factors allocated to vehicles involved in fatal or serious collisions. Now, this really is where it gets interesting, and I will put some figures up on the wall behind so we can keep track of them. The most common contributory factor for older drivers was that they failed to look properly. But guess what? It was also the number one reason for young drivers too. So one has to ask that if the most common cause of serious collisions for both elderly and young drivers is that they failed to look properly, then why are older drivers being treated so much more harshly? Interestingly, when you look at those in the 32 to 40 age group, the main factors were exceeding the speed limit and then following others too closely and defective brakes, none of which appear for older drivers. Second on the list for older drivers was that the driver failed to properly judge another driver's path or speed. For young drivers, second on the list was that they were careless, reckless, or in a hurry. Now, which of those would you consider to be more serious? Which could potentially do the most damage or cause the most injuries? Older drivers too had careless, reckless, or in a hurry noted on the contributory factors list, but it was way down the list with just 8% of their collisions compared to 18% for young drivers. Bit of an imbalance coming on here, folks. Other factors include loss of control for both old and young drivers, but whereas it was a contributory factor in 10% of collisions for older people, for young people it was 14%. Poorly executed turns or manoeuvres accounted for 8% of collisions for us old uns and just 1% less for the young whippersnappers. For young drivers, the other main factors are excess speed, travelling too fast for the conditions, inexperience and excess alcohol, none of which even figure on the list for older people. So who's coming out as the better driver here, I wonder? One factor that does make it to the older person's list is a dazzling sun. Now, I'm not sure why that would affect older drivers more, but certainly in my area there have been 2 pedestrian fatalities caused by a dazzling low winter sun that momentarily blinded the driver, but that was 20 or more years ago, and only in one of those was the driver old. So again, which do you think are more serious? I would suggest maybe that excess speed, travelling too fast for the conditions and excess alcohol are far more serious factors than a dazzling sun. To me, there seems to be a conclusive imbalance in the way older drivers are treated. Medical issues such as an illness or mental or physical disability account for only 11% of collisions. So why is so much emphasis put on it when we come to renew our licenses? That doesn't seem to make sense. So what can we deduce from this data? Well, I believe it shows actually there's not a huge difference between young and old statistics, except that younger drivers appear to have much more serious contributory factors. Excess speed and drink driving are choices made by the drivers. They are conscious decisions. And where the contributory factors actually overlap, the percentage for the older drivers tends to be less. In my book, that makes younger drivers more dangerous on the roads, and certainly more dangerous than older drivers. And yet the new renewal proposals clearly suggest that older drivers are being more severely treated. I would advocate that England, Wales and Scotland adopt the restrictions used in Ireland for novice drivers and riders. In Southern Ireland, novice drivers have to display an N plate for 2 years, and they face lower thresholds for blood and alcohol, and a lower threshold of just 7 points to be just disqualified from driving. In Northern Ireland, they have to display an R plate for a year. Also, they're restricted to 45 miles an hour for the first year, allowing them time to gain experience and hone their roadcraft skills. This makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, in the rest of the UK, what is there? Oh yeah, sod all. You've passed your test, so go crazy without any supervision and try not to kill anyone. Yeah. I mean, many of our viewers have suggested that all drivers should have an eye test at least every 5 years. I would support that for sure. I mean, many people already have regular eye tests. We seem to be heading towards a future where age, not ability, dictates who can be behind the wheel, as I said earlier. And I believe that insurance companies are one of the worst for that. I mean, for example, to get a discount, they want to know how good a driver you are. Not when you apply to get your quote in the first place, but just to get a discount. And they measure that by asking if you've had any formal advanced driver training. and they cite the Pass Plus scheme and the Institute of Advanced Motorist Driving Tests. But they don't even consider advanced training with the emergency services. I mean, how many Institute of Advanced Motorist drivers still actually drive as they were taught all the time? Whereas every single day, blue light drivers are expertly driving in some of the harshest and most stressful and riskiest of situations, day in and day out, where progress on the road is tempered by acute hazard awareness. It's not all about high-speed driving, it's about safe driving. And most of them will continue to drive in the way they were taught well into retirement. It's so ingrained into them. Yet no weight is placed on this by the insurers. Now, I've had several comments about this from retired police officers. And also, the number of claims you might have had, as far as I'm concerned, are irrelevant. I mean, the question should be, when was your last collision? Claims can be for many, many non-driving incidents. Many viewers commented that their last collision was years ago. Some have never even had a collision. My last one was in the 70s. Yet as soon as you become elderly, you're an insurance liability, whatever your driving record is. So, when they're prevented from driving, there are so many implications for older drivers. The loss of independence, access to healthcare, social engagement, personal dignity. And yes, that's very similar for people who get disqualified, but they get disqualified for their choices of driving, not just for getting old. And it's all very well for the government to proclaim that the new rules are intended to improve road safety while ensuring older drivers can maintain their independence. But for me, all the evidence suggests that's a load of bull. Yeah, I quite agree that older drivers can present with issues of dementia, slower reactions and poor eyesight. But the evidence is there. The data as I see it doesn't warrant such draconian oversight of older drivers any more than it does the young. Now, your voice matters in all this, folks. What kind of future do you think we older drivers want? It needs to be a balance between safety, individual liberty and accessible mobility, of course. So come on, we want to hear about your experiences, your opinions and your thoughts on this. How can we ensure a fair future for the over 70s when they go on the roads? That's it for now. Let's have those opinions. If you like our content, please like, share and of course subscribe. And having told you last week that we'd reached our interim target of 40,000 subscribers, we're now well on our way to 42,000. So thank you very much to the 1,500 new viewers who thought the channel was worth subscribing to. And thank you everyone for your support. In the meantime, thanks for joining us. And until the next time here on Grey Matters, it's bye for now.